Hey guys, today I have summarized and picked out the most important changes happening next season when the final shape launches. I highly recommend watching this if you want to stay up to date with the meta builds, economy, and any major buffs as well as nerfs happening. You can find all these changes in the final shape thread under the build crafting channel on my Discord server, which I highly suggest joining because this weekend we are farming Kingsfall. Let's start with what's staying and what is getting vaulted. Bungie has a website that shows exactly this info, and I'll make sure to leave a link down below so you can have a read for yourself. Most importantly, everything related to the 4 previous seasons and the 4 vendors in the helm is leaving. Legendary shards are also getting removed. Zavala, Shags, and Drifter bounties are getting replaced, so do not pick them up. And lastly, weapon spec mods such as boss spec, major spec, and minor spec are getting removed from the game. Here you have more things leaving the game on launch. And I also have a video on my channel showing how to claim old season pass rewards, which you should definitely grab before it's too late. Next up, we have the power level changes, because with the final shape, our power level is also increasing, with the floor now being 1900 and the pinnacle cap at 2000. Also, these are the new recommended levels for different difficulties, and we have been confirmed that the day 1 raid contest mode will be at 1965 power level, meaning that everyone should be able to reach it without any issues. One more update to power level is that now there is an account-wide power level, meaning that if you are level 2000 on your hunter, but your warlock is only 1900, you will still get level 2000 gear on your warlock. This is really good for those that play multiple characters since it makes leveling up much quicker. Rahul will have a ranking system as well as more ways to obtain exotics from him. You will mainly level up with Rahul when decoding engrams and focusing exotics. So ideally, you save up a bunch of exotic engrams, that way you can open them up when final shape launches and instantly max out his rank. Once you reset his rank, you will obtain special privileges allowing you to focus any exotic in the game. With this change, lost sectors will no longer drop exotic armor, but now instead they will always drop exotic engrams, which you can later decode with Rahul. In the final shape, we are also getting exotic class items, which allow you to basically mix the perks from 2 different exotics into a single armor piece. And some of these combos sound extremely good. I suspect they will be heavily nerfed, but still it might be the new meta next season. For example, hunters can finally combine Assassin's Cowl with Liar's Handshake, Assassin's Cowl with Synthoceps, or even Shards of Galanor with Star Eater Scales. Titans have very similar combos, for example Assassin's Cowl with Synthoceps, Heart of Inmost Light with Armamentarium, or even Horfrost Z with Kefri's Horn for that deadly class ability usage. Our warlocks did get the worst combos out of the 3 classes, but they still have some very interesting ones, such as Heart of Inmost Light with Verities or Starfire, Tag with Vesper for those insane rifts, and Osmimancy with Starfire for the crazy grenade spam. The perks will always be random on these exotic class items, so it could take you 100 runs to get the perfect exotic rolls. And these will be farmed from an activity that we yet don't know. Since we are on the topic of exotic armor, next season, after masterworking your armor, you will have one more option to upgrade it again, and this will unlock an Artifice armor slot, which is basically the same as it is on legendary armor, but this time on an exotic. An Artifice slot gives you a +3 stat mod of your choice, so that's a nice buff. Next up, let's talk about enhancing your weapons next season, because this is a feature that's being added to most weapons in the final shape. You will be able to either craft or enhance any weapon released that season, as well as some old ones listed in here that are still active in the game. The way that this will work is by having 3 enhancement levels. Tier 1 will provide you with an enhanced intrinsic, Tier 2 will enhance your left column of perks, and Tier 3 will take care of the right column. In both of these, you will not have to visit the Enclave, meaning that you can enhance your weapons from anywhere. Moving on, we have the Pathfinder, and this will be the new bounty and weekly reward system that will replace the old one. This is basically a tree with quests that you will be completing one by one until you get to the final reward, where you can claim it and reset your Pathfinder. These are the destination rewards for the Pathfinder, and these are the ritual activity rewards. Pathfinder doesn't seem like a bad idea, because the whole bounty system felt really weird in Destiny. There was really no reason to do any bounties whatsoever, so hopefully this new Pathfinder system works better long term. Now we can move on to buffs and nerfs that will impact all your builds in the final shape. Let's start with the weapons and their perks. They are removing the damage bonus of kinetic weapons to bosses. This is pretty big because it basically means that Izanagi or any kinetic damage weapon will automatically do less damage against bosses. On the other hand, this is a good nerf because now you can use stasis or strand weapons without losing out on the damage boost. They are also nerfing wave frame grenade launchers, so now the wave will reach 15 meters instead of the original 22. On the other hand, now the blast radius stat on wave frames is no longer useless, and instead it will increase the length and width of the wave. Osteostriga will be receiving a 4-second cooldown on the poison burst on kills. I personally don't think this was really needed, to be completely honest. Surprisingly, Lament is also getting nerfed. They are decreasing its healing by 20% and its heavy attacks damage also by 20% on the high end of the combo. Colony is getting a buff, and now it will spawn additional robots on final blows. This is similar to Galahorn, and we might see this weapon being used more often for ad clearing. Ariana's Vow will now cause ignitions whenever you break a solar shield or a barrier champion. This should be really fun to use with the solar subclass. Deterministic Chaos is getting a much deserved buff, making it intrinsically counter barrier champions, and they have also swapped out the perks, so now you will make enemies volatile more often. The perk Chain Reaction is getting nerfed on special weapons, lowering the damage by 20% and the AoE size by 15%. On the other hand, it's getting a 30% damage buff on heavy weapons. In my opinion, this will most likely not change anything, and weapons such as Forbearance will be used just as often. Chill Clip is getting buffed on slow firing fusion rifles to now only take 2 bursts to freeze a target, meaning that weapons such as Deliverance are basically getting a buff. Deconstruct will no longer refill your ammo from thin air, because now it will do it from reserves instead. I mean, it's a fair nerf, but it kind of neglected the whole point of using Deconstruct in the first place. Next up, we are moving on to subclass and exotic armor changes. Stasis is finally getting its own damage resistance buff. This will be called Frost Armor, and it will reduce damage taken by 4.5% per stack, up to a maximum of 5 stacks, or 8 stacks with Whisper of Rhyme, which by the way has been reworked to now no longer provide you with a stasis overshield, but instead it will increase the duration and amount of stacks that you can have with Frost Armor. On that topic, Renewal Grasp has been nerfed and buffed at the same time, because now they no longer instantly provide 25% damage reduction, but instead it will give you and your teammates a stack of Frost Armor every 0.9 seconds. So this ends up being 22.5%, making it a nerf, but at the same time, if you have Whisper of Rhyme equipped, you can go all the way up to 36%, making it a buff. We are also getting a new fragment called Whisper of Chill, which makes our stasis weapon have a chance at spawning a stasis shards when we get kills. Whisper of Chains got absolutely obliterated, and it no longer provides any damage resistance. Instead, now you will have a chance of spawning a stasis shards when you have the Frost Armor buff. On the other hand, Whisper of Torment is getting a huge buff, increasing the overall grenade energy gains that you get when being damaged by enemies. This will most likely be a must in any grenade spam builds. The shatter damage is finally getting a much deserved buff in PvE, which basically doubles its damage, making any stasis crystal build or stasis crystal generating weapon such as Verglass Curve basically get a buff. Warlocks are also getting a slight buff on their Ice Flare Bolts aspect, allowing it to chain into more enemies. Winter Shroud aspect is finally getting some buffs, making it increase your class ability recharge rate when slowing enemies, and also provides damage resistance when activated. Stasis grenades are overall getting a bunch of buffs when used with the Touch of Winter Hunter aspect. Glacier grenades will spawn one additional crystal, while Cold Snap grenades now will multiply each time they freeze a target, as well as create medium and large stasis crystals. The Stasis Hunter Super is also getting its damage increased as well as tracking speed. Now for the big nerf. Wall of Radiance is getting absolutely destroyed next season. You won't catch me standing in one in endgame content. The healing is getting halved, and they are also decreasing the damage resistance that it provides against bosses and normal combatants. Now, if I am completely honest, this nerf will mostly impact Master and Grandmaster activities, and maybe even some Legend ones. In normal content, you will be more than fine. For some unknown reason, the Titan Bubble is also getting nerfed. I mean, they are increasing the damage reduction while inside the bubble, and they are also adding a Void Overshield that regenerates over time when standing next to the bubble. But you will no longer get the damage increase buff that we used to get, meaning that using bubble for damage will be completely useless. It will be purely a defensive super. The Arc Titan Thunderclap melee is actually getting buff, which is nice to see. Now you will get additional damage resistance while charging the melee and slightly after. They are also increasing the minimum damage by 20% and the maximum by 33%. With that buff comes another one which synergizes really well with Thunderclap. That is the Knockout aspect buff. Now it grants 50% increased melee damage instead of the 25% that it used to grant. And now you will also get healed a flat amount on melee kills. This will be nice for overall survival. Arc grenades are also getting a solid buff, starting with Storm grenades getting a 20% damage increase, Skip grenades with a 15% damage buff, and Arc Bolt grenades also with a 15% damage increase. The Arc Fragment Spark of Recharge will now persist until you fully heal up your shields. Spark of Beacons now also worked on Arc heavy weapons. This fragment creates blinding explosions on kills, and before the changes it used to work on special ammo weapons only. This knock him down buff is pretty big. They are reducing the internal cooldown on the throwing knife refund. The internal cooldown is what prevents you from spamming your throwing knives too fast. That is why if you rapidly throw 2 of them, your melee will not get refunded and it will go on cooldown. This buff reduces that internal cooldown, meaning that you will be able to spam your knives 5 times faster and still get them refunded. The Orbs of Power created with Golden Gun Marksmen are getting a nerf, and this nerf is even bigger when you have Star Eater scales equipped. Bungie is trying to prevent people from chaining an infinite amount of golden guns. Consecration is getting a nice buff, increasing the damage of the ignitions that it creates by 20%. Titan's Super Hammer of Soul is getting a buff as long as you don't have the Aspect Sol Invictus equipped. You will now make more sub-munitions, which are basically the mini hammers that appear after your super hits something. These will also deal more damage after the changes. Swarm grenades are getting a buff which will increase their tracking, linger duration, and overall damage by 20%. Hunter's Snare Bomb is also getting a buff. Now it will last longer after the detonation, and it will deal increased damage to enemies the longer they stand inside the smoke bomb. Void Titans are getting their shield throw melee buffed. Now it will be able to bounce to up to 5 targets, with improved tracking, which was much needed, and a 20% damage buff. Magnetic grenades are getting buffed for warlocks with the Chaos Accelerant aspect. Now you will deal 20% more damage and have their cooldown decreased by 10%. Both Void Warlocks supers are getting a nice buff, with Cataclysm spawning 2 extra Seekers, while Vortex will last 3 more seconds. Thread of Warding is going to the chopping board since they are halving the Woven Mail buff, meaning it will only last 5 seconds on Orb of Power pickup. The Weaver's Call aspect for Warlocks is getting buffed to now have a chance of spawning a Thread Link from any strand damage. Grappling to a grapple point is also getting nerfed in order to prevent players from infinitely grappling to one. Although these nerfs are very minimal and almost no one will even feel the changes. Titan's aspect into the fray is getting its melee energy regeneration nerfed from ×4 to ×3. Banner of War is getting a pretty big nerf overall. First, they are lowering the total duration of the buff by 6 seconds. Then they are also nerfing the damage bonus when using Synthceps or Worm Gods. The damage nerfs are pretty big, but it is not the end of the world. Strand 1-2 Punch Titan will still be perfectly viable. The 6 Coyote exotic will now have a permanent Reaper mod attached to it for free. Star Eater scales are getting one more nerf, making it harder to reach the maximum benefits of the exotics and decreasing the effectiveness of Orbs of Power from 2% to 0.5% when using Golden Gun. This, alongside the previous nerfs, should make chaining infinite Golden Guns pretty damn hard. Armamentarium is getting a free Firepower mod attached to the exotic, which is a nice bonus. Kefri's Horn damage is getting doubled in PvE, and now it actually scorches enemies each time it hits them instead of doing it only once. This should be really fun to use if it also ignites the enemies. Synthceps is getting its Linger duration nerfed from 8 seconds to 5 seconds. This is not bad as it seems, but at the same time, it's quite devastating in some cases. Mantle of Battle Harmony, one of my favorite Warlock exotics, is getting a buff to now give you even more super energy with the cooldown between activations completely removed, making this exotic a very solid pick next season. Sunbracers are getting a pretty heavy nerf. You will only be able to throw down 4 grenades instead of 5, and they are also decreasing the grenade's duration by 2 seconds, which basically translates into a 20% damage decrease on each grenade. Assassin's Cowl is getting fixed, so now it will no longer work on normal melees like it used to for many seasons. Now, to finish up the video, we have 2 quality of life changes. The Ammo Finder counter will no longer reset on death. So this is basically more heavy ammo for everyone, and especially for those players that died more often. Raid armor mods will no longer cost any energy. With this, they are trying to convince people to run raid mods more often, so you will most likely see more of them next season. And finally, the downtime for the final shape will be 24 hours, but with Bungie you never know, so ideally expect a slightly longer downtime. And that is all the notable changes that you need to know for final shape. If you found this video useful, then remember to drop a like and subscribe if you like my content. Huge shout out to my Patreon members and have a wonderful rest of your day.